Estate Show with Pat Lopez, where we talk everything real estate. Today's show is going to be a little bit different because we're going to talk about the real estate market. And is there going to be a collapse? Is there going to be a correction? Is there going to be a recession? All I know is when I listen to the news or if I go online and I Google real estate market, I see hundreds of articles of people talking about how the housing market's going to collapse. Well, is that going to happen or isn't it? So what we're going to do for this show is we're going to look at the last housing major correction or collapse, which was 2008. And we're going to look at what happened then and what's going on today, 2023. Is there any similarities or none? So let's buckle up your seatbelt. Let's look at some slides and let's see what is going on in 2008 versus 2023. Okay, for our first slide, we're going to talk about what kind of loans were available in the 2000s, early 2000s, 2005, 6, 7, and 8, and what is available today in 2023. So if we go back and we look at 2005, 6, 7, there was something called subprime loans. You could buy a house with no income, no asset, no job. The only thing that was done was pull your credit, and you were approved. You could buy homes at 100% financing. You could buy homes at 125% financing. So that means you bought a house, you bought a car, and you bought some furniture. I mean, it was really crazy. It was like the wild, wild west. There was nothing you had to show as far as the ability to make payments because of these no-doc loans. Also, with the subprime, there were products that would allow you to buy a house with 500 credit scores, 550 credit scores. So it was really, really a crazy time. And take it one step further, you could buy investment properties, no doc as well, only putting 5% down. So the lending standards were dramatically different. Then came about Dodd-Frank. Dodd-Frank was legislation that was passed stating that you have to show the ability to be able to make mortgage payments. So that means all full doc loans. We had to get pay stubs, W-2s, tax returns to make sure the person qualified for the home. And if you wanted to buy that investment property, you had to put 25% down. So the standards became much more difficult in qualifying to purchase a home or an investment property than what it was in the past. And we're talking about over 10 years, 10, 12, 13 years of these much tighter standards. So the market was drastically different back in the early 2000s versus what there is today. Also, we have population. How many people can buy a house? Well, back in the 2000s, population, and as far as working families, was 138 million. 138 million. Today, there's 20 million more people who could potentially buy a home. $158 million. Million people, not dollars. So the population grew, and that causes a need for more housing. Okay, we all know what's going on today is a housing shortage. Okay, there's more people that want to buy than sellers out there, and more houses or less houses being built today than what was available in the past. Okay, so as population grows, you need more housing. We also have, which I alluded to, is how many people or companies like the Toll Brothers of the world building homes, right? Well, back in the early 2000s, we're talking about 2003, 4, and 5. Builders were really on a tear. They were really building more houses than the population needed. Okay, so we're looking at over 7 million, almost 8 million homes being built back then. Now, if you look at today, in the past 5 years, we had about 4.6 million homes being built. That's 40% less homes being built. Now, remember, the slide that we just showed you before, we have 20 million more people who could potentially buy homes. So the demand has become greater, but guess what? The builders got a little bit snake bitten. They lost a ton of money, so they're much more conservative, and they're not building houses like crazy, like they did in the past. So what is that happening, or what's going on back in 2008 versus today? Well, back in 2008, there were 4 million homes for sale.
basically a 2-year supply of homes on the market. Amazing. You would have realtors begging people just to come look at their home, giving bonuses if somebody would, bring a buyer and if they actually bought the home. Okay, 4 million over 2 years of supply. Today, you're looking at a little bit over 700,000 homes available. 81% less homes available. Now, we know what a healthy market is, and typically, what is said, you need a 6-month supply of homes, which would be a healthy or balanced market. Okay. Right now, we have anywhere between 2 to 3 months worth of supply. So the sellers are in control here because we're not in that balanced market of having approximately 6 months of inventory available. And if we look at this chart, back in a healthy market, what people would say back in 2017, 18, and 19, there was anywhere between 1.5 million to 1.2 million homes available on the market. And that was considered a healthy market. Today, we're a little bit over 700,000 homes. So when people are yelling and screaming, saying, hey, we're going to have a collapse, we're going to have a collapse, we're going to have a major correction, we may have a major correction. Nobody has the crystal ball to know that, but law of supply and demand. If there's more buyers than sellers, it's going to be really, really, really hard for prices to come down. But if there's more sellers than buyers, then of course those prices are going to come down. Now, as far as the population, we talked about how there's the population has grown. There's 65 million homeowners in America, 65%, and we have 82.5 million, 82.55 million homeowners. Okay, and out of those 82.5 million homeowners, 40% of them own their homes free and clear. There's no mortgage. So it doesn't matter how bad things get. They're not going to get foreclosed upon. Can't foreclose upon somebody if they don't have a loan. So there's a lot of people that have not only a ton of equity in their home, they own the homes free and clear. Now, if we look at interest rates, the interest rates over the past year have been higher. And how many people have bought homes in the past year? We're looking at about 3.9 to 4 million people who've bought homes from last October to this October. Okay. And out of those 3.9 million, 4 million people, around 35% of them paid cash because interest rates were higher. People chose not to finance their homes and they actually bought them cash. So that's going to leave us somewhere in the vicinity of about 2.5 million people that have these higher interest rates and are really strained on affordability. Okay, so if we're looking at 82 million homeowners, but we're only talking about 2.5 million of these homeowners who have elevated loan payments and that elevated appreciation, so their buying power is a little bit strained. It's not a huge number. So now let's go on to the next slide. Let's see interest rates. Who has what? Well, we're looking at almost 92% of every homeowner has an interest rate 6% or below. And then you can see that we have 82% with 5% or below and 62% with 4% and below. And then people below 3% are around the 23%. So what does that tell you? It tells you with the appreciation of home values and these people who bought these homes, 2 years, 3 years, 4, 5 years ago, and they refinance to these super low rates, it's actually cheaper to stay in your home than to rent a home today. Now, if you bought a house in the past 2 years, 3 years, maybe not. But if you bought a house 2, 3, 4 years ago, it's actually cheaper with these low interest rates to live in your home, stay in your home, than actually get an apartment. So also, what happened back in 2008? Unemployment rate was at 10%. versus today unemployment rates ranging somewhere around 3.9%. Why is that important? Well, if I lose my job, I may have to sell my house. I may not be able to afford the home, right? And back then, that's what ended up happening. That's why people were selling homes. That's why there was 4 million homes on the market. If I didn't have a job, hey, I had to go back, move in with mom and dad, or stay with a friend. I couldn't afford to pay. Right now, the employment market is pretty strong. So there's not as many people in that position. And remember, with the interest rates being so low, which a lot of people refinance and capitalized on that, it may be cheaper to stay in a house than to actually rent a home. So we have to think about that as well. We also have delinquency. Well, because unemployment was high, delinquencies, were high. And we're talking about 10% delinquencies versus currently 2.6% as far as delinquency. So that means, are we going to have foreclosures? Maybe we will, maybe we won't. Once again, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know for certain. But foreclosure rates was a 4.6. Today, the foreclosure rate is 0.3%. Now, you'll hear a lot in the news, oh my goodness, the foreclosure rates just jumped. Well, if I have one person who is in foreclosure and now another person goes and that's two people in foreclosure, that's a 100% jump. We go from 1 to 2. That's a 100% jump. So the media will turn around, or clickbait will turn around and say, hey, there was a 100% increase in foreclosures, but the foreclosures are still historically so low. And once again, it doesn't mean that we're not going to have the economy go in recession, a bunch of people are going to be laid off, and delinquency starts going up, and foreclosure rates starting to go up, and inventory starts hitting the market. We're not saying that, but this is where we're at now. And there's nothing impossible when it comes to that. Now, appreciation. Back in the 2000s, 2007, 8, 9, 10, the housing market went down about 21%, and I think it hit a high somewhere around 35%, where if you bought at the top of the market, you had that correction where your house wasn't worth nearly as much as what you paid for it, right? Well, today, just in the past 2 years, we had an appreciation of around 35%. So if you get in trouble with the shortage of inventory, you could turn around and put the house for sale. So you don't have to get involved with foreclosure, and you can most likely sell that home. That's the situation people are in today with the appreciation. And if you look at this chart right here, this shows you the history of appreciation from 1942 to current. And you can see all those green shows year after year after year appreciation of home ownership. It's really one of the safest bets that you can actually do looking at this chart. Now, granted, in 2007, 8, 9, 10, 11, you had, the housing market go down, and that was like, the great housing crisis. It went down. But if you look right after that, it rebounded back up. Okay. So most people have equity in their home. The ones that don't, maybe bought their house a year ago. Today, they're buying today or a year ago, and they have the higher interest rates. Those are the people who are really vulnerable right now. But remember, 40% of those people, 35, 40%, paid cash for their home. So they're not vulnerable. Or a lot of these people put large down payments on these homes. So we're only talking about 2.5 million people or so that are in that situation. So to wrap things up and just look at everything, what did we talk about? Well, we talked about in the early 2000s, there was something called subprime loans. Today, there's virtually none. Are there some bank statement programs? Yes, but virtually 99.9%, everything's full doc. And if you're buying a house, you can afford the house on paper, okay? We also have households working. Well, we have 20 million more households working. We also have construction really curtailed. So we have a shortage of houses. We don't have an abundance of houses. Inventory is nowhere near that 4 million. And forget about that 4 million. We're not nowhere close to 2019 when we had 1.2 million houses for sale. We're in the 700,000s. So we're almost half of what was available in 2019. And that was considered a healthy market, right? A balanced market. There was about 6 months or so worth of inventory. Average interest rates, most people have 30-year fixed loans. We don't have adjustable subprime loans like we did in the past. Heck, there was things called a coffee loan, a neg am, where you would actually have ability to make a payment based on your start rate. So let's say that start rate was 3%, but the real interest rate was 6%. So instead of you paying down your loan, you were actually adding on top of your loan. Your balance was actually going up, then down. I mean, there was some really wild stuff going on back in 2007, 8, and 9, right? Unemployment rates are relatively strong right now. Delinquencies are low, right? And the average appreciation, people have equity in their home. There's money there. And of course, that's not for the people who maybe had bought in the past year and a half. But for most people, and we're only talking about 2.5 million people, and out of those 2.5 million, what are the percentages? Even if the percentage hits to 5%, 5% out of those 2.5 million go into foreclosure, we're only talking about another $100,000 more houses hitting the market, well below the 1.2 million houses in a healthy, normal market. So there's some slides and there's some sites. I got all this information from all the different sites, whether it's be S&P, Case-Shiller, the BLS reports, and so on and so forth. All this information was put together. And listen, I'm not an economist. I'm not here saying that, hey, there's no way there can be a housing collapse. I really don't think that. But who am I? I'm just an average person looking at the data and putting all the numbers together. Will there be a correction? Yeah, maybe there'll be a slight correction. What are we talking about? Maybe 5-10% at the most, right? But if you have 35% equity already in your house over the past 2 to 3 years, okay, you're still well ahead of the game.
Well, that's the Real Estate Show with Pat Lopez. Now, be sure to follow the show on Facebook and Instagram and subscribe below. I have some really great guests lined up for you, some really good topics. Also, leave a comment. Tell me things that you liked, you didn't like. But more importantly, let me know what topics you'd like me to cover in the future. Super important. Remember, this show is everything real estate. No limits. Hope you enjoyed the